Good afternoon, and welcome to a special conversation about Michigan's Sustainable Food Systems Initiative with Jennifer Blesh and Jeremy Moghtader. Today, we have the opportunity to gather alums and friends from the Boston and New York communities, as well as some guests from all over the country. So wherever you are today, welcome, and we're happy to have you. My name is Ann Orloff, and I have the great pleasure of being part of Michigan's Office of University Development. I am the Senior Executive Director for Leadership and Major Gifts in the Eastern and Southern states. Before I introduce our first speaker, just a quick note about the Q&A. So we have set aside a great amount of time later in the program to address many of the questions we got in advance, so thank you for those. But if you have questions throughout the program, please feel free to enter them using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So now I am honored to introduce Dr. Jennifer Blesh. She is Associate Professor in the School for Environment and Sustainability at the University of Michigan, and she is part of the Sustainable Food Systems Initiative. She conducts ecological and interdisciplinary research to understand social and environmental outcomes of agricultural management practices and food systems. Her work focuses on increasing crop diversity, identifying how cover crops and perennials affect soil health and nutrient cycling. And she's especially focused on legume nitrogen fixation and soil carbon sequestration. She also studies social processes that lead to food system transformation. Community engagement and integrating multiple perspectives are fundamental components of her scholarship. Prior to her current position, she held postdoctoral appointments at the Federal University of Mato Grosso in Brazil and at Cornell. Jennifer, thanks so much for being here today. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Anne, for the kind introduction. I'll just start my slideshow. Can you see my screen okay? Great. So I'm excited to tell all of you today about our growing Sustainable Food Systems program at the University of Michigan. And I'd like to start with a short summary of the enormous challenges that we currently face. I'll be brief here because I'm sure many of you are familiar with these. Our food, water, and climate systems are becoming more volatile. The ability to produce and access food is threatened by climate change, especially more extreme weather events like hotter summers, flooding, and mega droughts. Yet the simplified industrial food system is also a main cause of these crises. So simplified agricultural landscapes that rely on non-renewable inputs cause global land use change and biodiversity loss, soil degradation, water pollution, and climate change. Globally, the whole food system from production to consumption contributes 37% of greenhouse gas emissions. Despite producing more calories than ever before, more than 800 million people are affected by severe food insecurity, while a global obesity epidemic continues to grow. So in the US, children are now expected to live shorter lives than their parents. Almost half of the adult population in the US has either pre-diabetes or diabetes. And the food system is also not equitable. US agriculture developed from a history of removing indigenous people and their food cultures from the land, then enslavement followed by sharecropping, and a century of federal farm policy that restricted the ability for people of color to own and keep land. The essential workers who keep food on our plates tend to be people of color and have been exposed to COVID at higher rates, while continuing to be exploited as farm workers, meat packers, and restaurant workers who have low pay, unsafe working conditions, and a lack of basic services. Like in many other industries, political and economic forces over the last 150 years have really driven the specialization and scale of farms and the consolidation of supply chains. In contrast, public policies that might support biodiverse, sustainable, regenerative, equitable food systems are not widespread. So these structural conditions mean that today's sustainable food systems efforts are really struggling against the odds. And given these constraints, that means that a lot of the innovation towards sustainability is currently led by groups of individual farmers and their communities. Importantly, these groups are pushing for policy change across scales, and our program seeks to build institutional support for these grassroots efforts so that we can learn from and scale up community-led solutions. These urgent problems also need to be addressed by a new paradigm that links all of these elements of our food system, ecosystems, technologies, markets, institutions, values, behaviors, and more, that together shape sustainability. And the need for a new approach is clear in the broad UN Sustainable Development Goals, especially SDG 2, Zero Hunger, which has targets for environmental sustainability, public health, and social equity. Transforming the food system will require major innovation in all sectors to overcome these multi-scale barriers, and this includes the need for new research approaches that help us understand, first, how to harness rather than undermine ecological processes on farms, how to mitigate public health crises caused by diets high in sugar and fat, undo racism and other injustices across the food system, and shift resources to leverage farmer and community-led innovation. By building the right interdisciplinary expertise in the UN Food Systems Initiative, we aim to expand the evidence base for political change to help shift the balance of resources and investments to develop sustainable food systems. And this effort began around 2011 with a cluster hire of 5 interdisciplinary faculty in sustainable food systems, along with the senior faculty who proposed this cluster hire. And the cluster spanned 4 units or colleges: Taubman, LSA, the School of Public Health, and SEAS. And today we have 70 faculty affiliates spanning more than 10 units. And I just want to highlight some examples of groups of people illustrating the breadth of topics that this initiative is tackling. So this cluster here I'll call agroecology. Michigan's really been a leader in developing ecological knowledge about how to reduce external inputs and environmental costs of food production, covering biodiversity, genetics, soil health, carbon and nutrient cycles, and microbial communities. We also have a group in nutrition and health focused on diet and health disparities in marginalized populations, developing stakeholder-supported strategies to improve SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, as well as international projects on how biodiversity in agriculture influences diet quality, health status, and food security of vulnerable populations. We have the Center for Sustainable Systems, so a group of engineers who've quantified greenhouse gas emissions from different diets, showing the importance of plant-based diets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We have other engineers working on closing loops and thinking about human waste recovery for improved water quality. We have faculty in policy and sustainable development, assessing how food policy councils can transform local food systems, how governments implement progressive reforms, or using techniques like remote sensing to understand farmer adaptation to climate change across large scales. And then finally, and very importantly, we also have a focus on environmental justice. So projects on food access in Michigan, and now on Indigenous rights and food sovereignty, as well as community-based participatory research on the determinants of health in places like Detroit. So equity and access to food are key social justice issues that are central to solving the food crisis, because availability of food is not the same as access to food. And currently the root cause of hunger is social inequity. So with this breadth, we're already producing novel interdisciplinary solutions that can help make the food system more sustainable. And I want to just show a couple of example research projects that can start to chart a path forward. And these 2 examples here are 2 of the 7 projects that were funded by our Graham Institute Carbon Neutrality Acceleration Program, which involve food system faculty. One is focused on soil carbon sequestration with cover crop mixtures, and the other on nutrition among students targeting diet choices. This team also has several grants from the USDA, NSF, and other agencies to work together on collaborative projects. One example here This team is using satellite imagery in combination with ground data from about 100 farms across Puerto Rico to understand the impact of hurricanes on coffee production and the management factors that can make farms more resilient to extreme events like hurricanes. In another USDA-funded project that I lead in collaboration with Jeremy at the campus farm, and support from the Land Institute, is an experiment testing a novel intercropping system with the perennial wheat kernza and 2 different forage legumes. And we're quantifying how this diversified system affects soil carbon capture, nutrient cycling processes, soil health, and crop productivity and quality, with potential to expand to broader questions in the food system, like nutritional quality, marketing opportunities, and many others. I next want to briefly share 2 new project ideas that are currently in development that aim to expand the interdisciplinary work and extend these regional and global partnerships to have higher impact, larger scale projects. And one of these ideas is on agrivoltaics. So using agricultural landscapes for multiple socioeconomic functions. This would launch a demonstration site and experiment at the University of Michigan campus farm, and build a network of on-farm sites to understand the potential for integrated renewable energy and crop and livestock production to generate clean energy, increase yield, buffer against drought stress, and create multiple revenue streams that can support farming systems and communities. More than 50,000 acres of solar is slated to go into farmland in Michigan in the coming years. So this is a key opportunity to have real-world impact together with policymakers, developers, farmers, and communities. The second project in development focuses on sustainable and equitable management of food, energy, water systems to address nutrient pollution globally, but with a case study in the Great Lakes, thinking about circular economies, so closing loops between rural and urban environments. For example, 58% of the nitrogen and 70% of the phosphorus that go into Detroit in food leave the city in solid waste or liquid effluent that can then further react in the environment, causing pollution, like the algal blooms in Lake Erie. So this project will link engineering work on waste recovery, ecological work on crop diversification, social science and policy dimensions of equitable food access, and remote sensing and data science to think about developing distributed green infrastructure toward this end. I'll also just briefly highlight a few aspects of our academic programming. We also, as a university, train the next generation of food systems leaders. And this includes an extensive curriculum of more than 60 courses and an internship program that has community partners serving underrepresented minorities in Detroit. And one course I wanted to make sure to highlight here is our innovative community academic partnership course, which is called Food Literacy for All. And that's co-led by faculty and staff and community leaders in the food system from Detroit. And this course launched in 2017. In 2020, we had the highest enrollment to date with 178 students. And since 2017, we've had more than 2,000 community members engaged in the course, and the videos have been watched more than 15,000 times on YouTube. So this is an opportunity, especially with the current digital reality, for folks on this webinar to participate. And then the latest academic programming success is funding from the USDA to form a new transformative food systems fellowship program. With matching funds from this is more than $1 million that will support 12 underrepresented minority master's students to study food systems at Michigan in SEAS, Urban and Regional Planning, or the School of Public Health. And this will contribute to building a larger and more diverse cohort of students studying food systems at And that leads me to a final point that I want to make. You might be wondering, why do this work at Michigan and not at a land grant that has a large agricultural program? And I'll answer that in a couple of ways. First, it's impossible to tackle climate change and other forms of global change without transforming the food system. And these global challenges are so urgent that all institutions should help address them. And at Michigan, we can help provide important solutions for at least two reasons. First, our scholarship on food systems is more interdisciplinary than that of a lot of land grants. We're intentionally bridging areas that have been separated in disciplinary silos in universities, but are really fully integrated in reality. So we have faculty working at the forefront of agroecological science, nutrition and public health, engineering, and equity and social justice in the food system. We also are able to conduct more transformative research compared to land grants, which have been at the leading edge of agricultural simplification and its unintended consequences. These institutions are still under a relatively large influence from stakeholders who benefit from the status quo. And as a non-land grant, we actually have a bit more freedom to innovate and push boundaries in this area. And there's also a convergence of factors that make Michigan an ideal location for leading sustainability transitions. Not only do we have this interdisciplinary breadth and a systems perspective with ecological science as a core and top-notch medical and engineering schools, issues of justice and equity guiding our work, but we're also in a special location. Michigan really has it all. We have the dominant grain cropping systems here, major public health crises, threats from a changing climate, Great Lakes water pollution, but also on the bright side, a really uniquely diverse range of crops and cropping systems. And Michigan also sits at the center of national urban and food justice movements, which really has positioned the state to help lead food systems transformation. So given these increasing pressures like climate change, pandemics, consumer interest in sustainable diets, and social movements for racial justice and social equity, we're really at a unique window of opportunity to help catalyze widespread transitions to sustainable food systems. And we hope to continue building a program that will be a leader in this critical effort. So I'm going to pause there and introduce Jeremy from the campus farm. And then we'll have the joint Q&A after that. Just get my intro. So I'm pleased to introduce Jeremy Moghtader. He's the program manager for the University of Michigan campus farm at Matthaei Botanical Gardens. The farm is a living learning lab for sustainable food systems work on campus, focused on leadership development, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the food system, carbon neutrality, and food grown by students for students. The farm has grown substantially over the past 3 years in terms of site development, programming, and sales of produce to Michigan Dining for use in residence halls, which actually topped $100,000 in 2019. Before coming to the University of Michigan, Jeremy was the director of programs for the Michigan State University Student Organic Farm, where he also served for 10 years as farm manager and directed an organic farmer training program. He received his bachelor's in economics and a master's in resource ecology and management, both from the University of Michigan. So I'll turn it over to Jeremy.
Excellent. Thank you, Jen, for that kind introduction. And thanks everyone who's joined us today for the presentation. I'm going to get my screen share going. There we go. So as Jen so aptly shared in her thoughtful introduction of me and in her presentation, food systems really sit at the nexus of some of our most complex social and environmental issues. What we eat, I see my bottom of my screen still popping up there. What we eat, who has access to it, how we grow it, have deep and profound impacts on the climate, on water and water quality, our personal health, public health, and economies. And all of that contextual work that Jen described and all of the amazing faculty members and collaborators at the university, including, as she mentioned, our collaborative partners in dining and student life, have really enabled the campus farm to serve in that living learning lab food system space here on campus. So many of the issues that you'll heard Jen talk about, I will touch on how the farm is active in some of those through our student-focused leadership work. I have the pleasure to get to work with amazing students. My role is to help guide and facilitate their work, provide technical assistance, and apply my now 15 plus years of ecological and organic vegetable and fruit production to bear to help us provide spaces on campus to ask and answer some of these complex questions, both in and out of the classroom space. So, as Jen mentioned, food grown by students for students is a core component to what the university Michigan Campus Farm has been about since its inception. Students have leaned into and grown their vision and mission since they started the farm 10 years ago to include a strong focus on food access and justice, as well as on-farm carbon neutrality. And the farm as a whole works to empower a learning community of students that fosters leadership development and high impact research, teaching, and learning opportunities to help us create future leaders and change agents for all of us. So a little bit about the physical footprint of the farm. It is a 10-acre site that is part of the Matthaei Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum. And for those of you who are familiar, the site is at the Botanical Gardens and not at the Arboretum site. And over the last 10 years, we've been able to really, the students and the folks at the Botanical Gardens and myself in my role, which is was able to join the students about 5 years ago, have been able to expand the farm from a very small footprint of several hundred square feet at one point to a 10-acre footprint that has 3 acres in vegetable crop production, as well as 4 30 by 96 passive solar hoop houses, which are these structures you can see in the back, and I'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute. We have the 1 acre perennial wheat research plot that we do in collaboration with the Blesh Lab that Jen pointed out, as well as a food forest, an archway path, and a straw bale structure. So I'm going to show, have the pleasure to show you lots of pictures because the farm is photogenic, and I'm going to use those pictures as a way to talk through some of the work that the students do and that I help them with. Some of the students whom we work with have various different roles. We have a management team, as well as students who just are part of our farm crew, students who participate in work days, students who participate in courses through tours and labs, and a class that's fully based at the farm that we were able to start in the fall of 2020. But just to give you a sense of some of the different manager roles the students have, we have a food safety and orders manager, we have a lead manager, campus engagement, food access managers, marketing and communications, finance manager. And sometimes these students come into these spaces having a lot of previous background knowledge and interest in the subject, or sometimes, like Tori in the picture there, she was a graduate student in SEAS and knew that she wanted more experience with finance management, and was happy to jump in and learn the ropes while she was on the job. So it's a great opportunity for students to have leadership develop in an applied space where they can focus on something that they care deeply about, that's both curricular and co-curricular. You can see last fall, our visioning retreat, we had 11 managers, 12 crew members last fall, and 2 farm management fellows. The farm management fellow program is designed to allow a graduating senior that's been part of the management team to stay on for 2 additional growing seasons to really hone their management skills, and as well as do that on a stagger. So each year we have a senior fellow and a junior fellow. Not all of the students who join the farms team, of course, are planning to go on to be farmers, and that really touches to Jen's point about, we're not a land grant, we're not a farmer training program, which is what did when I was at Michigan State. But students who are interested come to the farm recognizing the importance of food systems and how it impacts so many things in their lives and in the realm of sustainability. And they want to be able to learn about food systems, food production, ecologically and organic-based food production, and apply those learned tools into their career paths and their subject matters as they go out into the world. And so we have a mix of a broad range of students from a wide range of backgrounds, from engineering to business students, of course, environment and sustainability students as well. Just a brief history. I won't go over all these details and read them, but the farm is about 10 years old, and it was started by students in parallel at a time when the cluster hire that Jen talked about was getting going, and the Sustainable Food Program was being organized by students, and was funded originally through the Planet Blue Student Innovation Fund that helped get some of the initial infrastructure set up on the farm. Since then, 2016, when I started, I was able to help the students start selling food to dining, which is one of the main places our food goes, and our primary economic generator in addition to donations. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we do with the dining revenue and what happens, what kind of donor projects kind of impact our work. So we have the food grown by students for students focus. And in order to sell that food to M Dining, we need to have our farm food safety certified. So Group GAP, or Good Agricultural Practices, allows us to sell to dining by maintaining our food safety certifications that require an annual inspection. Other places that our food goes are to a farm stand that we run on campus in collaboration with the students at the Sustainable Food Program, and through donations to the Maize and Blue Cupboard Food Pantry on campus. This is just a fun picture. This is our first delivery in the summer of 2017 to Mosher Jordan Dining Hall, packed in our reusable blue bins. Made a trip up there, packed the elevator full, and delivered it zucchini and other chard and other greens for the chefs to use in the dining halls. Part of the food access work and education work that the students have is operating the farm stand on campus, which serves as an educational platform and an engagement platform, as well as one of the only places you can get a lot of fresh produce on campus in the immediate campus footprint. So we set up there every week on Thursdays, and students, in addition to being able to buy produce, there's a lot of educational activities that help them ask questions about food production, where food comes from, and some of the more interesting different aspects of the unique produce that we grow there. We grow a mix of things that are both fun and unique, as well as things that they might expect to see more commonly. There's food donations to Maize and Blue Cupboard, which is an important part of the work that we do. We receive donor funds to help support some of our donation work, as well as funds that we receive from the American Botanical Gardens, U.S. Botanical Gardens, and the American Public Garden Association to run an urban agriculture program, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Actually, on this slide right here. So this last summer, we were able to partner with SFSI, Sustainable Food System Initiative, along with D-Town Farm and Oakland Avenue Farms in Detroit. You can see pictured there Janet on the left, who's a urban planning undergraduate student at U of M, Devin on the right, who is a student at Dearborn studying sustainability, and Jess in the back, who is a C's graduate student. So we had a great group of students who all rotated to work on different farms, both the campus farm and the two Detroit-based farms, doing some cross-pollination work and really sharing lessons learned, as well as supporting food production and distribution to more food secure individuals in our communities. The students really started to lean into that focus on food security when the pandemic hit. The dining halls closed, and we still had the capacity to grow food, and knew that there was a high degree of demand in the community and a great increase in food insecurity. And we were able to secure some funding that allowed us to intentionally grow and produce food to supply to food rescue and food access organizations in Southeast Michigan. So pivoting gears from food access, the students are very excited that they have been able to set a carbon neutrality goal for the campus farm. They recognize that the impacts that food production has on climate change, and they recognize that as an organization and a unit within the university, as part of the Botanical Gardens and part of the larger U of M, we have a role to play to try and help the University of Michigan and our broader society achieve these carbon neutrality goals. So the farm has set a goal for 2026 and just released that statement 2 weeks ago and got some nice coverage of it in an article in the Daily. One of the ways that we're already doing that work to reduce our carbon footprint is through passive solar greenhouse production. And we've been doing that since we started since I started at the farm in 2016. The students had gotten a grant to put up this hoop house that you see in the picture. Now that hoop house is heated only by the sun, and it allows us to grow, as you can kind of see in the pictures, year-round spinach and kale and other hardy greens in the winter in Michigan, as well as early tomatoes and early peppers and a few other cucumbers and other warm season crops. So the thing that's nice about that is a lot of folks believe that, seasonal eating in Michigan is, would be restricted to dried goods or something, but we are able to produce also a lot of lettuce in the late fall and early spring, along with these kinds of salad greens and spinach that are both nutrient dense as well as locally produced. The side benefit is this spinach that comes out of those hoop houses in the winter is candy sweet, in my opinion. One of the responses to the cold is that the plant concentrates sugars in their tissues to lower the freezing point, like maple trees do. And as a result, the spinach is extra sweet and particularly delicious. There's a few more pictures of the students in their passive solar hoop houses. That spinach was planted, as you can see in the picture, in early October, and then we're able to harvest it. And that you can see if you look closely on the edges, there's snow out there on the side, but the temperature in the hoop houses can get even t-shirt warm, even if it's below freezing outside. Here's early pepper harvest coming out of the hoop houses. Here's a little side, another part of our carbon neutrality work, as Jen mentioned, is this research test, teaching and demonstration facility for agrophotovoltaics that will help the farm reach its carbon neutrality goals, while at the same time providing a research platform for how we might stack ag production and solar energy production in a way that is synergistic and beneficial. So I'm going to now go through mostly slides that are just pictures, and I'll point out those opportunities where a program or an idea or a concept is represented. Here, the students are harvesting a lot of lettuce and salad mix that we sell to the dining halls. We have, pre-pandemic, had a large chunk of the incoming medical students out through one of their rotations and service activities. They were doing some work weeding in that picture, but we also are able to talk to them about the farm and the importance of the intersectionality of like local food production and healthy eating, which isn't always a strong focus of their in-school learning. Other research collaboration with the Blesh Lab on cover cropping. Some beautiful produce in the hands of our lead manager. Different crops that we grow and focus on are things that can really be highlighted in meals. So broccoli, greens, lettuce, tomatoes. We don't grow a lot of onions or carrots or things that would be mixed in with other ingredients. Cucumbers. The farm really strives to be this platform for engaged learning. So one of the ways that we've engaged with students is through collaboration around the straw bale structure. And I'll move through these slides fairly quickly, but you can see the students were able to build a structure at the farm that was the first off-grid student-built building, near carbon neutral footprint, made with local materials, timbers inside of the structure were milled from trees on campus under the leadership of Professor Joe Trumpy in the School of Art and Design and Programming and the Environment. There you can see kind of the finished exterior footprint. There is one of our Indigenous Collaborative partner members giving a talk inside the struggle structure. Signing partners with us on some events that they do to promote sustainability out there. It's just a pretty picture of Chard and the struggle in the background. Those lights are being powered by the sun. Even though it's dark, there's a battery pack behind there that keeps them running in when the sun's not shining in Michigan. There's an archway trail that was added. That was a student collaborative project as well that was donor funded. The straw bale structure was also donor funded. This is a really cool project, collecting old tools just to create some wayfinding integration with the botanical gardens when you're on site. We grow a lot of transplants for an annual transplant production sale. That's Haley. She was the lead grower that year, and she, along with her colleagues, grew all those transplants that were made available for sale to local community members. We also donate a lot of transplants to places like Cadillac Urban Gardens in Detroit and Growing Hope in Ypsilanti for their garden programs where they give out transplants to community members or to stock their own urban farms. All right, I'm running a little shy on time here, so I'm going to just click through some of these remaining pictures because they're pleasant. Those are students in the Campus Farm Practicum course. Some more farm stand and beautiful farm shots. Hosting the farm stand, a little pop-up version of the farm stand on North Campus. We did a pilot with some of the units on campus at the dining hall units in their cafes to have some grab and go campus farm produce, along with drinks and other prepared food that are there. Squash harvest is one of the fun fall activities. Like I said, we grow a lot of lettuce, so there's students about to start lettuce harvest. Students had a work day, enjoying some fruits of their literal labor. We collaborate with SFSI to host the Summer Bridge Scholars Program at the farm every summer. So those are students making salsa at the farm, which is always fun. In addition to doing great work, the students do like to entertain themselves sometimes. I think this picture is amazing. We just have a few more pictures showing off some well-earned farmer tans, so it seems. Frost on the kale is beautiful. Students like to call this the snail kale or the kale snail. Bring a lot of different fun things that help students really get exposure to the fact that, oh, look, you can have green cauliflower and purple cauliflower and yellow cauliflower, orange cauliflower. Building the hoop house with the students, winter harvest. Planting a research plot. A dining event. Some of our beautiful cherry tomatoes that are some of the most eye-catching things on the salad bar at the dining halls. And thank you so much for your time and your interest, and I look forward to the questions that you all have.
That was really great. I have so many thoughts. I mean, on one hand, just to hear from you, Jennifer, about the scale of the research, right, and the impact potentially on so many communities, and then bringing it down to Ann Arbor and what students are doing. And I am really wishing the campus farm was there when I was a student 20 plus years ago. Maybe I'll have to come volunteer one of these days. Anyway,
Well.
thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. As I mentioned before, we had a lot of thoughtful, interesting questions. We'll try to get through some of them. And again, if others have questions they'd like to enter, please go ahead. So there was some discussion about Detroit throughout the presentations. And of course, we have a wonderful partnership or try to have a wonderful partnership with the city. There's a question specifically about, are we using or encouraging the use of open land there? Because there is so much open land. How do you respond to that?
So we at the University of Michigan are not necessarily doing that, but all of those innovative grassroots community groups and farms that I mentioned that we have the pleasure of partnering with in Detroit are doing that work. So you might be familiar with groups like the Detroit Black Food Security Network or Oakland Avenue Farms, or Jeremy, you can help me with other names.
Yeah, Detroit Food Policy Council, as well as Keep Growing Detroit has a garden resource program that helps support almost 2,000 individual and community gardens through produce distribution and other support services.
And that's a great question and point. I mean, that's one thing that's really unique about Detroit is that it has so much land compared to some other cities like New York or Boston, as well as rich soil because of its location in the Midwest. So it does have that opportunity.
And so our approach in working with those farms, as well as I know SFSIs, is to ask them in what ways we can collaborate with them that support the work that they're doing on the ground in those communities. Some of the leaders of those farms have been the co-instructors for food literacy for all and have helped shape and inform education for U of M students broadly based on their experiences in Detroit.
Thank you. So talking about maybe more at the state level, there's a question about what is the role and impact of state level food system planning in achieving sustainable food systems in the US. There's an acknowledgement that some states are more committed to this than others.
This is not an area that Jeremy and I work on directly. We have a wonderful colleague here. She appeared in my show, Professor Hui in urban planning, who does some of that work here at the University of Michigan. And I believe she recently completed a national assessment of the status of these state level food system plans and found that about a third of states have one that exists and maybe another 20% or so have something in the works. That said, there's a lot of variation in terms of how advanced they are and what they've been able to achieve. They're pretty new. And a lot of them are not actually led by governments themselves. They're led by nonprofits or universities or other organizations. So it's not fully clear yet how much they'll be able to advance policy change. One shining example that you could look up is in Vermont, where they've had one in place for a long time and have actually done evaluation of the state level plan. So that might be a good place to look or to contact Professor Hui here at UMich. That's a great question.
And Leslie, Professor Hui has done some evaluation work with one program in the state that I think has been fairly impactful and successful, which is the 10 cents a meal program. So looking at how food can travel from local farms into local school food service and receive extra 10 cents per student per meal, which doesn't seem like much, but there isn't, the money per meal is very low to start with. So 10 cents is a reasonable percentage upgrade to help support the purchase of local fruits and vegetables into school lunches. So there are examples, but certainly we are not maxed out on what we maybe could be doing to catalyze that kind of change.
And just one more quick example, like as an ecologist, one thing that I've been thinking about related to those efforts is that while they think a lot about local food access and local food procurement, they haven't yet done a lot of work on the actual environmental sustainability or outcomes of those programs. So just equating local with sustainable isn't always exactly accurate, and you can dig into that a little bit more. And that's a direction that some of these initiatives are taking.
Thank you. You both addressed food equity or food sort of justice issues around food, but could you talk a little bit more about how that maybe, Jennifer, impacts your research and then also at the campus farm on the more local level?
Yeah, where to begin? I think just the one key point or takeaway is that it really underpins everything that we do here. It's been a core focus of how the program has developed. acknowledging that, we have this position as an elite institution that's not always, friendly to a wide range of communities. And that's a barrier that we need to overcome and build trust and build truly, and true authentic partnerships and engagement. And so folks across disciplines are committed to that effort, often through participatory research, trying to derive questions together with communities. We do a lot of on-farm research, so work that can in aggregate address some broader question, or you can pull some generalizations out of that, but also gives back something very tangible to the participants themselves. Gosh, there's a lot of, I mentioned the new Transformative Food Systems Fellowship. So even among students, how can we increase the diversity of our own student body? There's just a lot of examples. I don't know what you want to add, Jeremy, from the campus farm, but I just will reiterate, it's central.
Yeah, I think, you can come to this from different lenses or different spaces, but I think for the students at the farm and for myself, and I know my colleagues at the Botanical Gardens, there isn't really you can't have sustainability without justice. There is no future state where the world is ecologically, economically, and socially sound if there are extractive procedures that are creating a large underclass or a large group of people who are still experiencing a lot of systemic oppression. So I think the question becomes, how are those communities empowered, not just through food justice versus just food access? How are they empowered to help grow food or have economic opportunities that help them with self-determination? So I think that the students understand the university's privilege and understand their own privilege as a member of the university community, and want to understand how they can use their time and energy and resources to help catalyze change for folks. And I think the pandemic really opened, like I said in my talk, the pandemic really opened students' eyes to their capacity in that space and the need and for their ability to intersect with it, as opposed to being more just focused on, say, the student experience, but focused on how that student experience and their education intersects broadly with the community at large.
Thank you.
In a functionally meaningful way, right? Like people are eating the food that they're growing, and that matters to them and matters to their children. So,
well, and even the farm stand you have every Thursday, right? I just love that as a touch point on opportunity for education for all.
Yeah.
So let's talk about beef, right? Even from my vantage point, it's very much part of the conversation that the methane gas that's off-put from cows and beef, and just beef consumption is a problem, right, for sustainability and of course health as well. So how do we reduce beef consumption? That is the question.
I might start with a broader point, which is that we need to reduce beef consumption, but we need to also be cautious to say categorically that it needs to be reduced across all demographics, especially globally, right? There's huge inequities in who has access to meat. And it has really important vitamins and protein components for cultural significance in a lot of places. So it's very fair to say in the US, we eat twice the RDA of protein, and consumption needs to be reduced here, at least on average at a national level. We certainly know that beef has 250 times the emissions of the most environmentally sound, like legume-based plant protein sources. So absolutely that needs to happen, but I just wanted to qualify that a little bit and also point out that even within beef production, certain production practices can actually increase the nutritional value of that beef. So things like grass-fed beef have more vitamin content than grain-fed beef. And we also know there's other environmental benefits potentially of grazing in a regenerative agriculture context, especially on marginal lands that aren't good for annual crop production. So a lot of complexity there that really needs to be thought through. And I think if we knew the answer to how to get people to eat less beef, hopefully we would do it. That's such a those questions about how to change people's diets are so tricky. But I think a simple way to answer that would be to make it more expensive to actually have the true cost of producing that beef embedded in the beef. Then we get into tricky territory with equity and access issues again. But yeah, at a simple level, it's certainly nowhere near the real cost at its current price. I don't know what you would add to that, Jeremy.
I think, obviously I don't have a quick silver bullet answer, but I think one of the interesting things that is worth mentioning here is that, collaborative partners with Campus Farm and M Dining and faculty members and SFSI have been looking at the university's, the carbon footprint of the university's food system and how we can reduce that, which of course that can't avoid some questions around the beef conversation, and working with folks who are in the space around psychology and things called nudges, right? So if you put the meat, you have to opt the meat on the plate, or if the meat is on the salad bar or wherever it's being served is a little bit farther to reach it. All of us have individual personal choices, which are important, but all of us make those choices in the context of systems. And so I used to make a joke sometimes, about with students that, pigs dig, and if you want to raise a pig, you have to understand that about a pig. And not to make an analogy to humans, but we are creatures that have habits, and there are structural things in our environments that can help us do things that are better for us as a collective. If you put a recycling station out without a trash can next to it, people are going to put trash in the recycling. But we need to have structural based changes, I think, that go along with our personal choice. And I think those have to occur at both policy level, institutional level, and personal levels. And we certainly don't have those all working in sync at this moment. So I think there's room there for a wide range of expertise at U of M to come to bear on how to address those issues.
Thank you. I was cued that we only have time for one more question.
Ah.
And I know I selfishly would like to appeal.
I'm hungry after that slideshow, Jeremy, so it might be good to take a break.
And we want to be sensitive to everyone's time, but I'm thinking about a couple things that we can include in follow-up. There was recently a really wonderful piece on Michigan Dining's use of state sourcing an enormous amount of food from the state. We'll try to include that. But let's end on a really quick, fun note, because I just couldn't resist this one, is where can we buy the Kale to the Victors t-shirts?
I knew that if I put that picture in there that people were going to ask that. At the gift shop at the Botanical Gardens and at Argus Farm Stop in Ann Arbor. So if you have access to physically being present in Ann Arbor sometime, you can usually find them at either of the Argus Farm Stop locations or in the gift shop at the Botanical Gardens.
Love it. Well, thank you to both of you. This is really a beginning of a conversation about Michigan's impact in this space and really small changes we can all make in our lives. So I know everyone will join me in continuing to follow your work and your leadership at Michigan. So thanks for all of that you do. We'll be sure to stop by that gift shop and get that shirt. And thanks for everyone for being here today. A really wonderful conversation.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
so much for having us.
Thanks, everyone.